So I'll kind of talk today a little bit about acing the data science interview. And our main kind of thing that we're going to talk about is getting comfortable, and you'll catch on more as we go. But first, just a little bit about me. I kind of entered the field of data science before data science was a thing. So I have a PhD in health psychology, and what I primarily did in that, I can't do any counseling, but what I primarily did was statistics. And so I did statistics for a chronic pain clinic, trying to help improve their patient care. And from that statistics background, I found out I really, really, really liked that. And from there, I headed into the Army Public Health Center, and I was one of their quantitative data analysts. And that was when data science really picked up as a thing, and I began to add programming to my statistics skill set as well. So that's kind of how I entered the field. So there are a couple different types of interviews, and I'm going to leave that loosely in quotes because you'll notice on this list, a lot of this is not actually interviews, right? The first one it's your actual kind of question and answer back and forth. It's similar to your behavioral interview. However, it's more focused on your technical aspects. It'll be focused on statistics. It'll be focused on your coding skills. It'll be focused on all of those things that you need to do your job as a data analyst or a data scientist. But there are many other ways that they use to assess those skills. And you may have to do more than one of these for a company. You may encounter all of these at some point in your job search process. You may encounter only a few. The next one I see a lot is the coding challenge. And so they'll give you information that you need to be able to do the job. So they're going to test you on those specific skills. I often see this in Python and in SQL in particular. And so usually it's done by some sort of third party. It's some sort of testing company, and it's done online. This can be HackerRank. A lot of you may be familiar with that already if you've started your job search process. That's one of the biggest companies out there. It's also one of the best because once you do one assessment, you have access to their HackerRank community in which you can take additional practice assessments and build your skills. So that's actually a really wonderful thing. Don't think, oh no, I got saddled with a coding challenge. You're actually going to think to yourself, all right, I finally have access to this great pool of resources. I will say that a lot of these coding challenges, whether they're HackerRank or some other company, are not yet super data science specific. So if you take a Python coding challenge, be prepared for questions on object-oriented programming, as well as things more related to data science, like your pandas packages or scikit-learn and things like that. So you really need to have a good grasp of the basics, your for loops, your dictionaries, all of that, because you want to be able to pass those assessments. Another way you can have a technical interview is through the take-home project. So some companies will assign you a practice project, basically, that has some data and they have some questions or some things they want you to do with this, and they'll give you a set amount of time to be able to do that. This, I think, is actually quite a sweet gig. I like this idea. You can have, sometimes it's 24 hours, sometimes it's up to a week. It all depends on the company. But they allow you to use any resources at your disposal. You can ask questions from anybody you know. You can look up things. You can work on the project on your own, as long as you're able to answer those questions well in the end. Really, really important. If you have a take-home project, you're going to want to document your code. Document everything so you're explaining exactly what you're doing and why. Make everything nice and clean and neat. And make sure that it all runs. Make sure that it runs from top to bottom, right? Sometimes in our Jupyter notebooks, we make a mistake, we run something else, we kind of have this weird iterative cycle. But if you tried to run it from top to bottom, nothing would work. Make sure you clean that all up when you're done. And the last type of technical interview I've found is actually not really an interview at all. It's a presentation of your results. I know some of my mentors has done this, and I have asked people who have interviewed with me to do this. It's to understand how you communicate data science. How do you communicate very technical topics easily and with a great deal of information, but not overwhelmingly technical, etc. So you could be asked to look at some graphs or tables or do your analysis as well, but then you'll be giving a presentation to a board showcasing your work that way. All of these have their strengths and weaknesses. All of them are both good and bad, and you might not encounter all of them, but we want you to be prepared. Let me tell you what the secret is here to this. The secret is that you have comfort. And I'm going to save questions until the end just so that I kind of don't get off track. But I'm seeing that they're coming in from the chat, so please keep typing them, and I'll keep going for now. So really, I think the secret to a good interview, technical or otherwise, is comfort. Getting comfortable with everything. And so we're going to spend the rest of this time here really talking about how you do that. And I want to introduce you to the concept, if you haven't already heard it, of hygge, which this is a Danish word, and it means basically coziness of the soul. So it's this like feeling of warmth and comfort and relaxation, feeling content, feeling secure. And I like to think of it in a workplace or in a technical way as knowing you have everything you need to be successful. It's being confident in who you are. It's being ready to showcase your skills. And that's what we're aiming for here. We're aiming for that security and comfort and warmth and feeling ready to perform. How do we do that? Well, let's talk about the process of becoming comfortable first. The first thing is to be prepared. You want to create some sort of cheat sheet that helps you out. Everyone's cheat sheet is going to be different. My cheat sheet is going to look an awful lot different than yours because we have different things that we tend to trip up on or different things that we want to remember and highlight. For instance, whenever I go on interviews, I'm terrible at remembering what my strengths and weaknesses are. It's a common question you get on interviews, but I always seize up. I totally forget. Well, on my list, I go ahead and I write down, I have a one-page cheat sheet, and I write a bullet point list of my strengths and my weaknesses. And so when I inevitably get that question, and I inevitably have all of my brain power fall out my ears, I can take a look at that cheat sheet real quick and have it down. If there are things that you constantly are getting backwards, I know a lot of people, for instance, trip up with the null and the alternative hypothesis or things like that. Just add a very brief note to your cheat sheet. You're going to be nervous when you do your interviews. As much as we try to get you comfortable, you're probably going to be a little nervous. So use that as your security net, as your safety blanket. If you're interviewing virtually, you have a huge advantage. You can actually have the programs up while you're interviewing. One of the toughest interviews I ever did was with the Army. They called me up impromptu, and because we had a time zone difference, they called me at the beginning of their workday, but it was 6 a.m. my time. And they said, "Can you interview right now?" Well, I said, "Okay, let's go." This almost never happens, by the way. Usually they set a time in advance, but so don't worry about that. But I went ahead and I did it, and I brought up my program that I was working on. They asked me specific questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? And I was able to pull up examples of my own code I'd written, which I documented with notes, and I could tell them exactly how I was doing things. So if you're interviewing virtually, don't be afraid to have that as a tool for yourself. Don't let it be your only crutch, right? If you're kind of looking back and forth a lot, or and if it's on Zoom or something, or you're taking way too long because you're searching for files, it's not going to work. But if you're kind of prepared, you have everything up and running, again, it's a nice security blanket. We're aiming for hygge. We're aiming for comfortable. Security blankets definitely make us feel warm, cuddly, and comfortable, right? And it's also good to be prepared with knowing exactly where your limits are, right? What are you good with? What do you know that you excel at? And what is really outside your comfort zone? Just knowing this is going to make you a better candidate because you're a little more self-aware. You have an idea of what's good and what's not so good. Another way to make yourself comfortable in your interview is to practice. You absolutely have to practice. You have to be comfortable talking tech. I highly recommend, as you're learning all of your new skills, subject everyone you meet to talking about what you're learning. We want to make sure you're telling friends, family members, coworkers, all about the different technical skills that you're doing because you're practicing just talking and speaking that technical language. That makes such a difference. You should never stop learning, especially in the field of data science, which is so new. There is so much ground still to be broken. There are new programs for data analysis coming out like every day. I almost kid you not. As I'm checking LinkedIn feeds, it seems like there's something new at least once a week, really. So you should always be continually learning and kind of keeping yourself on the edge as much as you can. Excuse me. One of the best ways, of course, we want to practice in general talking about tech, but you can also talk about practice interviewing. There is a great website for this called Pramp. And what they do is they pair you up with someone with similar background and experience, and you all can ask each other questions related to data science interviewing. So if you haven't done this before and you're looking for extra data science technical interview practice, this is a great place to be able to go. You can do it as much as you want, and it's totally free. Another way to feel prepared going into your data science interview is to build your portfolio. Projects are really a way for you to get practical knowledge about what you're doing, right? They're free experience. You don't have to pay to find data and analyze it. You pay in time, I guess, but hopefully you'll be able to sneak a little bit of extra time out in your week to do this. When you're getting that practical knowledge, now as people are asking you, different data science questions, what is a join, for instance? Well, you can say what it is, but then you can also say, I used it in this capacity for this project. Already, you've just elevated yourself to a whole new level, being able to say, I've done that before. This is how I used it. Here's what's going on, right? And so that's really critical. Not only can you have that in your interview, but you can also have that in your resume, right? The more specific you can get on your resume, the more you can give it to our AI computer systems that are plucking your resume out of a set, the better off you will be. So being able to showcase that knowledge is fantastic. And speaking of showcasing, you have to be able to show off your portfolio work. It don't mean a thing if no one's seeing it, right? There are a couple different options. I'm sure there are more than these two here, but what I see most often is people showing their work off on Kaggle or showing it off on GitHub. Either is fine. I highly recommend you put a link on your resume to your Kaggle or GitHub or both accounts. And that way they can see all of the work you've done for your various projects. You absolutely need to do additional projects. You probably have one due for your project at QuickStart. I know we have one as well for Wazoo, but you really need more to be able to get that practical knowledge and to be comfortable in your interviews. And there's also data contests, and so we can talk further about that. Lots and lots of different places are doing data contests these days. You can kind of say that they're in fashion. And there are a lot more than what I've got here, but these are some of the biggest websites I know about. So again, we have Kaggle. Most likely you're familiar with Kaggle if you've done a data science program. We also have data contest driven data and incentive. Both of those are not always something a data scientist can handle, especially incentive. but often they are data-based things. So take a look, see what's out there. There's also a myriad of smaller competitions. You may hear them as hackathons sometimes instead of data contests. Different organizations will do those. We'll also, like WazU does for just our students and our graduates, we do our own data contests. So there's a lot that you can kind of work on and get experience with, even if you're not ready to dive into one of those huge Kaggle contests. And a word about that as well. Some of these contests are big, right? The prizes are like $30,000 or $100,000. Don't be afraid to do those. You probably aren't going to win. I'm probably not going to win. But it's great practice, and it looks excellent on a resume that you're in there swinging. And most of all, you're gaining that practical experience and you're learning. You are going to learn so much from doing a project. It's so important. So there are also lots of ways to do this. Volunteering. This also gives you project portfolio experience. DataKind is one of the best websites I've seen out there. You can actually volunteer your data time, use your skill sets to help others out, which is fantastic. Donate Code is another one. Code for America sometimes has data science projects, sometimes it's web-based. You'll need to take a look and see. And then these two sites, Catch a Fire and Volunteer Match, both of them are more related to just volunteering in general, but there are often lots of data things on there. Again, you're trying to build up your portfolio, your resume, your comfort with data science things. The best way to do that is to jump in and practice. Volunteering is a win-win. You get all the practice and experience you need to get your dream job. They get some help, and you're able to really make a difference in the world. I always say that data science can change the world, and there is nothing that tells us that more than this list of places where you can volunteer your data science time. That's crazy. Okay, so now you've built up your comfort level. You're feeling like, yeah, I'm a badass data scientist. I'm ready. Well, guess what? Now you need to be able to demonstrate that comfort. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is don't be afraid. This is the hardest thing to take to heart, let me tell you. But first of all, don't be afraid to interview. You may feel like you're not quite ready. But guess what? This isn't your only shot. You are going to get more interviews. And each interview you do is great practice. It's an ability to learn more about companies and how they work. It's an ability to learn more about the interview process. So don't be afraid. I would say always say yes to an interview. There's no reason to turn any interview down. It's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to grow. How you're handling unknown questions. So most likely, no matter how comfortable you feel you are, you're not going to know the answer to every single question. It's just not feasible. I don't know the answer to every single question. But it's okay to actually say, I don't know. I have been the person doing interviews for quite a while now. And I'm happy to hear, I don't know, but I'd be willing to learn more about that subject. Or, but I'd love to hear what you have to say on it. Or, but I will report back on it later. Those are good things to hear about. What I don't want to do here is have you pretend that you know what's going on. Don't make something up. Don't kind of try to cover your behind and make it sound like you know what you're doing when you don't. I would much rather have you own up to me, be open and honest, and say, I don't know that, but I'm willing to learn. That's a great growth mindset to demonstrate. And asking questions about what you don't know is a great way to show that you're interested and willing to learn as well. We can also have you explain your thought process as you're going through a technical interview. Sometimes it's not just a question and answer session in person or over the phone. It's actually they give you some data and they want you to analyze it on the spot. They give you some information to actually work through. Don't sit there and talk to them in silence, right? You want to be able to explain how you're thinking, how you're approaching this problem, how you work through it. That's going to show them that you're comfortable with this task and you can walk through it. So speak out loud, talk about your requirements. Okay, this is what I have, this is what I need, this is how I want to get there, and here's my steps that I'm going to take. And then, of course, you want to show your comfort level by asking questions. It is okay to ask questions. Do not be afraid to ask questions. You want to get clarification in your technical interview on anything you're confused on so that you can be successful in that interview. And asking questions can also demonstrate knowledge. For instance, if someone asks you how to do a correlation, you might want to ask what kind of correlation, which is going to showcase that you have information on that topic already, right? So don't be afraid to kind of ask those questions. You can even ask questions if you have time at the end, right? They usually will ask, do you have any questions? This is a great time to ask more technically based questions about their company. Ask them about their specific methodologies. Ask them about specific projects they're doing. All of that is great to be able to learn about. And it can help create a conversation to be able to ask those questions. Ideally, any interview is going to become a conversation where you guys are talking about the different plans you have for the company and how things are going to go and where you might fit. Being able to dive deeper helps you with that conversation, and it really helps you learn as well. The more information you can get about how companies operate in the data science realm, the better off you're going to be. Okay, so there are some kind of materials you probably want to know a lot about in order to be very comfortable going into your technical interview. There are a few things that just come up again and again and again. If you're looking specifically at data scientist positions, you're going to need to have a little more experience in SQL and in Python. Excuse me. If you're going for data analyst positions, you still need a lot of SQL, but you'll also need Tableau. Now, R is still a popular language out there. I'm seeing that, but it's starting to fade. So if you only have time to focus on a few things, focus on Python, focus on SQL, let R kind of trickle off into the background a little bit. A lot of times, the people interviewing don't necessarily don't necessarily want you to know everything exactly about what line of code to use for something in any language. They want to know the concepts. And so as long as you can explain the general process of what's going on, it doesn't matter if you're interviewing for an R position, as long as you have basic familiarity. If you've done similar tasks in Python, you can talk through that and use that experience to your benefit. For instance, when I was working with the Army, we used SAS, which is a language that is almost pretty much dead. I'm one of the few people left knowing it, and I don't teach it because it's dying. But I know everything there is to know about data analysis regarding SAS, and I was easily able to jump into Python and use those same concepts and pick them up. If you have that theoretical background, you'll be fine. Some of the topics you absolutely have to prepare to be able to answer questions on are p-values and hypothesis testing, so kind of what that means. Joins, right? The different types of joins, what they are, how they relate, why they're important. Unfortunately, probability and logic puzzles are being used as a screener, basically. You don't actually need to do probability on the job most of the time. You probably don't need to do logic puzzles either, unless you have a really cool job. But companies use these as screeners for your general intelligence and your thought processes and being able to answer that. So you'll probably need to know those to pass some entry-level kind of information, especially if you're going for a big company. Facebook or let's see, Amazon or Apple, they definitely make use of this kind of logic puzzle probability thing. Google is another one. So you'll probably want to focus on that just a little bit, just for the interview. And then you should have really good ability to discuss, describe, do the extract, transform, load process. Or sometimes I see ELT, extract, load, transform, variations thereof. But be able to describe that whole process of what do you do from start to finish. How do you get data? How do you manipulate data? How do you use data? How do you report on data, etc.? Be able to be comfortable talking through that. And you almost always are going to get some really basic questions that are just your thoughts and opinions. There's no right or wrong answer here. But what I need you to do is practice talking about them and have a ready answer. So you might get things like, what is your favorite package? Or what is your favorite programming language and why, right? Or what does pandas do versus NumPy? What are those used for? What is scikit-learn? Things like that. There's no wrong answer necessarily. It's not a pass-fail. It's you talking about your opinions and your feelings about this. You better have an answer to what package you like to use the most, because you should be using them every single day. I get very concerned when someone can't tell me one package that they've learned or used in Python. That's a red flag for me. So make sure you're kind of comfortable with these really general and opinion-based questions as well. Another one I see a lot as well is, what's the next technology you're interested in learning? So again, opinion-based question, but it's a good idea to have an answer to that so you can showcase what's going on here. If you're someone who gets nervous, trips up, you can always put these things on your cheat sheet. Going back to the beginning of our presentation, anything that you stumble on a lot or you're worried about, put on that one-page cheat sheet. It will really help you out. And don't be afraid to take notes in a presentation. Sure, I'm the one giving the presentation. Don't be afraid to take notes in your interview, because that'll help you answer their questions better. That'll help you have questions later on at the end of the interview when they ask, what questions do you have? That'll help you be able to follow up on anything that you didn't know but want to learn.